urges common sense as we analyze and discuss current events facing the town of Winchester. My name is Glenn Albanesius, and as always I'm joined by Mr. Ken Fracasso, former mayor and current selectman. Ken, I know you have some opening comments, but I just want to frame tonight's show and let everyone know that we're going to have another, lively discussion about the upcoming budget referendum. This will be our fourth effort, and I think that the reason why we have continued to ask our citizens to vote no is that we feel that the urgency is pressing that this budget be structured in a fashion where we make some significant changes, and it really all boils down to sustainability. We've talked about that in the past, and we're going to talk about it again tonight. There is some urgency to getting this thing done right, and although we have gotten it down to a zero number, we feel pretty strongly that structurally additional changes need to happen so that when the reval numbers do come in and next year's budget process starts, that we're ahead of the game. And I think that that challenge is still ahead of us, and I hope that people listen to some of the things that we have to say. You may not agree with us, and we accept that. You may not want to vote for us, but I think that the mission at hand is serious, and I know that, Ken, you share that view.
Well, I do, very much. To start with, last week we introduced you to a show that seeks not to talk about people but about issues. There'll be plenty of time for that next year before November 13th. We want to take this time to focus on solutions. And we say solutions for a very good reason. We'll identify what we see as the problems, but what we really want to do is to focus on and explore with you what these solutions are to these problems. And we want everyone to know from the very beginning that we do have a view. We are Republicans, and we don't believe that more government spending is the answers to all our problems. Hence, that's the Democrats' plan, is to just keep increasing taxes. We are firmly and solidly against that. We do believe that smart government can help the communities and the individuals tackle the major problems that we face. The first and the most important part is partnering with our allies to form a good leadership, and we don't have that right now. The next thing we need is to have common sense ideas, and that's what we're going to try to bring forth through the taxpayers. And the third factor that we believe is a community consensus. We want the people, you the taxpayers, to give us your ideas, comments, and I think a combination of these three things will help us to achieve the greatness that we're capable of doing. We're here to explore things that make sense to us. As Glenn said earlier, you may agree or disagree with us, and then that's fine. But we're going to put forth some ideas that we think can move us forward. The only thing that we ask you, the taxpayers, is to demand that your government do the right thing for you. We need to hear more from you, the taxpayers. And I think once we have a plan crafted, we can move forward. And tonight we want to talk about long-term strategies as well as some short-term things.
Ken, the fourth referendum is upcoming this Saturday at Pearson School. It's 8 in the morning till 8 at night. We just want to make sure that people know that they can vote by absentee ballot if they go to the town hall any day this week, fill out the ballot application, and then they can complete the ballot right there. Again, we want to say pretty strongly that we're not telling you how to vote. I mean, our opinions, we feel, are founded in reality, but most importantly, we want to encourage everyone to get involved. Clearly, the more skin we have in the game, taking ownership of the town's problems, we really want to encourage that. I mean, if you look at the past elections and referendums, the amount of people that come out and vote seems to be trending down. We're a little concerned about that because these are serious times, not only for businesses but for families. And obviously we have some opinions on how to make things move forward. They're critical issues, and the more people that get engaged, we feel that that's certainly important.
If I could just interject for a minute, just so the people that are viewing this know, the hours for town hall are Monday through Wednesday are from 8 to 4. Thursday is the long day. They're open from 8 to 7. And Friday is the early day. They close at noontime. So Friday would be from 8 a.m. till noontime. I think maybe if we just talk a little bit about the background, how we've gotten to this point. Budget, as Glenn said earlier, budget number 4, which is coming up on the vote on this coming Saturday, is very, very similar to budget number 3, which, by the way, was overwhelmingly rejected. The mill rate will remain flat, but the spending will increase slightly. The taxes collected will also increase. The Democrats say that this is a 0, and therefore they want you to vote yes. But it's the way they got to the 0. If not for the fact that we had a one-time revenue, of $190,000 from RRDD1, we wouldn't have a 0. That, coupled with the fact that we have a police officer that's going to resign in January, so that money for that position has been budgeted for the entire year. So we have a half a year's salary for an officer that's not going to be there, coupled with the fact that we're getting a one-time windfall of $190,000. It's Glenn and myself's belief that money like this, that only happens once in a while, should go into the fund balance where it's desperately, desperately needed. To use this money and say that we have a 0 budget, it's not truth. I don't think it is anyways.
No.
I mean, technically it is a 0, but it's the way that we get there.
Right, and I think that at the last selectmen's meeting, we were asked prior to and have pretty repeatedly whenever we had the opportunity, offered some suggestions, and the last meeting was pretty much an in and out, quick. This is the way it's going to be, and we never really got a chance to lay our ideas out on the table.
Move the question night.
Move the question night, yeah, and that was similar to one of the other nights, the other special meetings we had, where the majority decided that what was going to be presented wasn't to their liking, and they shut that meeting down pretty quickly as well. We certainly, feel pretty strongly, as I said before, that there is some urgency to the situation, that in order for this town to solve some of those fiscal issues, we need to make some significant changes. And those are painful changes, and I got to be honest with you, if you look at, in the national level, there have been some governors that have tackled, pretty serious financial situations, and they did it by taking some radical steps to solving the problems. Not necessarily popular, not necessarily easy, but as you and I have said repeatedly, Ken, the challenges facing our town is no different than other towns in Connecticut, other states, certainly our federal government. We've reached the point where the taxpayers, especially in Winsted, have decided that they are not going to support a budget that just continues the status quo. And clearly, without major structural changes to staffing, to insurance, to the operation on the town side, we aren't going to be able to sustain this. We have virtually no fund balance left, and unless we make some, definitive changes quickly, it's going to be compounded next year when we do the budget for the following year.
Right. In the big addition in the coming year is the reval. That is going to be disastrous for, I'm sure, many people. But let's just step back just for a minute and explain why we don't think that this is a 0. Because the spending does go up. We are going to collect more taxes, and as I just mentioned, this one-time revenue of $190,000 plus the fact of a police officer that's going to retire in 6 months. We just keep spending this money in the same places. But there is a solution to this problem. We need to rein in our current services. They're just far too expensive for the voters in this town, and we can do this by reducing our expenses, by making the necessary changes in those areas. As Glenn mentioned, the health insurance, our pension plan. I mean, these are the items that need to be looked at, and reductions can be made. Then we need to restructure our government. We need to have it the right size. We've said this time and time again. We have asked the town manager to look at every single department in this town. Have you seen a report yet? I mean, I know I haven't.
Nothing specific. No.
I haven't seen anything. But I mean, these are the things that we need to have happen. We have to make the changes whatever those changes are necessary to ensure that our tax base can accommodate normal growth in a cost plus a catch-up in capital spending, which is how we plan to reinvest. In this budget that we're going to vote on Saturday, none of these items are included in that. It was basically, as I said, a remake of Budget 3 with some one-time windfall money.
Right.
And that's where we're at right now.
Right, and I think, as some of you may have gotten or will get, there is a letter going around saying, and I read, the people have spoken and they want a zero budget. Mayor Mary Ann Welcome. Finally, your government is listening. You stopped higher taxes. 0% tax increase. Vote yes on Saturday the 27th. I would say, and I may be on a limb here, that the majority were dragged kicking and screaming to this point right here. Would I?
I would say so.
Yeah, and
I'd say it's a fair analysis.
Yeah, and I think that the problem with the first budget that I saw is that they did address some of the key issues as far as roads, you know, some of the investments that they wanted to have the taxpayers approve. The problem is the backside of the equation was there were no spending cuts, and that's exactly what's going on in you know, our state government and as federal government. As I mentioned before, there's plenty of ideas as to where money should be spent and grand plans and stuff and things like that, but the offset to the taxpayer needs to be some savings and spending, you know, cuts elsewhere.
Right, there's no consideration as to where the money's coming from, other than just raising the taxes.
Right.
Which is, I foresee as an impossibility here in this town.
Right. Well, we have gotten to that point, Ken. I will totally agree, and I've heard that argument before, and you see it on the blogs repeatedly, that, you know, you need to invest in the town, you need to spend more, you need to vote for increased budgets. And the problem is that the reality is, for most, you know, families, we've reached the point where enough is enough. And as my dad used to say, that day was always coming in his mind. Well, we're here. And clearly the voters have spoken, and it's not just going to be Winchester, it's going to be other communities as they come up against the realities too. The one problem, or the one side of the equation, again, that Ken, that you and I have spoke about repeatedly, is the Board of Education. We feel pretty strongly that there are some savings and efficiencies that could be realized on that side, and the problem there is that they're protected by the MBR. They get an allotment of just short of $20 million. You and I tried to, last year, the year before, challenge that and say that because of the reduced number of students attending the schools and the fact that we had a larger infrastructure than we really needed, we felt pretty strongly that there were savings there. That
Plus the consolidation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There were a number of factors that led up to the opinion that we held pretty strongly, that we could save money on the Board of Education side, transfer some of that savings. And we never said all of it, but some of that savings to the town side. Because clearly, folks, the reality is, as I've said before, I mean, this is all headed to a blow-up, you know, and we've taken unpopular positions because we see this coming, and we see that, you know, it's no different than being at home with your kids sometimes. You know, you have to make very difficult, painful decisions, but to avoid them is ludicrous. And I just think that, you know, the further we wait to do some of these structural changes, I think the worse off we're going to be in the coming years. Right.
And you know, I just want to touch on the MBR once again. I know that some people think that this is a horse that's been beaten to death 1,000 times over, but there are still some people that don't understand. I mean, it's not this golden sacred cow as some people would have you believe. If, as Glenn stated, we had this mass reduction in student population, which we have had. We have had the consolidation of 7th and 8th graders going to Gilbert School, which has been a huge success, by the way. If, in fact, the Board of Education could possibly walk hand in hand with the Board of Selectmen to Hartford, and we would be in agreement on any of this, they would gladly reduce the MBR. They don't want to get involved in this, and they are most definitely not going to get involved in it when one side says black and the other side says white, or one side says more and the other says less. They're going to leave it right where it is, and I forget what year that they based this on, 2005 or 7. I mean, the year, it doesn't really make any difference. But I mean, it was a random number. They just, chose one year. But we've had many changes since that time. And it's a terrible plan. It needs to be addressed on a state level. And I think that's probably the only relief we're ever going to get if in fact it does come through representative and other state legislators that make a change. But that aside, if we go back now to our basic intention, which is to talk about this budget vote, we want to tell you some of the things that are not included in Budget 4. It has no restructure of health benefits or pensions. And these are the most expensive. They show the highest growth from year to year, usually double-digit increases. And we have to get away from this Cadillac plan that Winsted has enjoyed for several years. There's no other community in the state, and from what our insurance guy tells us, that there's no state agencies that have a plan that even comes close to mirroring what we have here in Winsted. So, and those are the two biggest areas. That, along with a defined pension plan. We are funded, here again the number beseeches me, I want to say around 70 or 74%, I think. But I mean, we still need to add money to that, the pension plan. But these are areas that could be looked at right away, and these are changes that could be made immediately. We have a budget, union process going right now with supervisors union. There's also the public works contract, the clerical. I think it's just about every single one. The police, I think, is next year, but they're all within the next 12 to 18 months that we're going to be looking at. And these are areas that need to have some serious reductions made.
Right, and I know that there is a specific union contract that is, been negotiated or is in the process of being negotiated. We're going to be looking at that pretty soon, and clearly, without speaking out of turn, I think that there was a strong move on the Board of Selectmen's part to look long and hard at how these contracts are going to affect us in the future. And still, maintain a relationship with the employees. I think that's key, obviously. But concessions have to be made. There's no two ways about that. And we're hoping that the report that we get back from Dale and the town labor attorney reflects that.
The staffing, which we also mentioned, that needs to be looked at. That hasn't been done yet. Is it adequate size? Is it the proper size? Is it what we need for the town of Winchester? And then we come to the education side of it. Superintendent Hofnagel has stated, recently that inflation has eaten up 5% of her budget. Yet there was no mention of the fact that the student population has been around 25%. So, I mean, we always hear about the bad news and the increases, but we never hear about the decreases. And if you're going to vote yes, you're voting to write off investment in our citizens that are in favor of more spending on staff. I mean, they give raises over there. They bought pickup trucks. I just think that they're doing the wrong thing with the limited amount of dollars that they have. They need to take full advantage, as I said earlier, of the consolidation of the two schools. There's still, I believe, some savings that could be realized in administrative staff. I just think that there's a lot of areas that could be looked at. And
we need to capitalize on it. I mean, clearly we've talked about the same issues, and the Board of Ed has defended the same issues time and time again. And part of the urgency that I mentioned early on is the fact that we need to start doing some of these things now. And the reality is, it's sad to say, I think the voters are on our side, at least the ones that are coming out and voting on the referendum. But politically, the majority that sits on the Board of Selectmen, certainly the majority of the Board of Education, just don't feel that they want to head down this path. And I think it's at our peril, to be honest with you. That's my opinion. I mean, clearly these changes have to be made, and the sooner that we start to put the political issues aside. This is about sustainability of our government and our town and moving ahead. And we haven't even gotten to the investment side of the equation. We're just concentrating right now on trying to, craft a budget that addresses some of these issues as far as where can we find savings. That's critical. We have to start to do that.
There also is a couple of items in the budget that I'll pick out. There's, I believe, $20,000 set aside for planning and zoning regulations. I said this from day one, that I believe this is something that could be done in-house, that's $20,000 we could keep in our pocket. And on the other side of the equation, there's $20,000 for neighborhood stabilization, which I think is grossly underfunded. I think that should be a $200,000 figure, not $20,000. I just want to sidestep for a second, along with the 0% that we had from the Democrats, there was also I guess it's supposed to be a letter. It looked like it was a copy of something that Selectman Candy Perez wrote in a newspaper. And I just want to read one of the things here. It says, she talks about stabilization. Stabilization downtown neighborhoods and creates a strong school system to attract families. The Democrat proposal contains funds for neighborhood stabilization programs. You know, if this wasn't so serious, it would be funny, because I distinctly remember when we were campaigning last year, this was an idea that was brought forth by Marcia Sterling to stabilize the neighborhoods downtown and to bring back growth and to convert single-family home, or I'm sorry, to convert multi-family homes into single-family homes. And Mrs. Marianne Welcome at the time scoffed at the idea, as well as did Candy Perez. And now they're trying to take credit for something that the Republicans have put forth. But the only problem here is that it's grossly underfunded. I mean, $20,000 isn't going to do anything. It needs to be, as I said, I believe $200,000 for some tax incentives to clean up these areas and to make these multifamily homes into something that is, you know, people would want, and it would raise more taxes. They also mentioned that the fact of let the school board come forward with a sub-MBR, which is the plan we were not able to approach that night at the short meeting. So Glenn and I wrote a letter to the editor that contained all our ideas, and they, you know, systematically picked each one apart. And we've already talked about this, that if the fact remains that if we did go hand in hand, which right now seems like an impossibility, but if we could, that this would be lowered. So I mean, there are ways out of this. It's just, you know, if they want it to happen, they will. If they don't, they won't. So I mean, it's something that's going to take some work, and but it's something that's worth doing. The other thing that this budget does not begin to address is the reval. Now, we are both well aware that the reval has nothing to do with the budget that we're trying to craft that should have been passed already, but is not. We're very well aware of that. What we're trying to do, Glenn and I, is plan ahead. Now, there's a new idea. You know, we know that we're going to get hit, and we're going to get hit hard. So our idea was to try to plan ahead, be prepared for the storm, the tsunami, if you will, that's going to come and hit us. They just want to write it off, get this budget passed. I really don't understand what the hurry is, you know, to move forward. I don't know what we're moving forward to. I think that the fact that we've had referendum after referendum at, I believe, what do we determine this is like $3,500 a pop?
Yeah.
You know, instead of taking the time and doing it right, which we said 3 budgets ago, we just keep rifling these things out every, you know, 4 to 6 weeks. And, you know, I think that we're just going to keep seeing no votes until we get something that the town people can, you know, wrap their arms around and embrace and really get behind and stand for.
Right.
So
I would agree, and as I've said before on this show and in public as well, is that we're not without opportunities. We have areas where we can cut. We have areas where we can save. We have areas where we can restructure. And we have areas where we can invest. It's not as if we don't have options. And I think that's one thing that, you know, we want to make crystal clear here tonight, again, as we're leading into this vote, is that there are opportunities for this town to get this done correctly. Just to do a 0 for a 0, as this says, you know, it's half the battle. I mean, the taxpayers can't afford the increase, that's clear. But the structure of the budget and the spending and the move forward has to address some of the important issues that we brought up tonight. And if we, you know, I used this analogy a short time ago. I watched a movie with my son, and there was a gentleman with a bomb strapped to his back, and instead of the analogy here of the town, instead of us trying to defuse the bomb that's headed with the reval in next year's budget, we don't want to go in and tinker with the timing device and add time. We want to diffuse it, and it's kind of an appropriate analogy here as to why we're so passionate about trying to make sure we get this budget done right. We can't continue to stain the status quo, what we've done in the past, move it forward, and expect the taxpayers next year with the reval for the people who are going to see that increase to afford it. It's going to blow up on our face, guys, and there's no two ways about it.
I like your analogy, but now I've got one of my own. You know what a great cake maker I am, right?
Yes, I do.
Well, I got to put a little frosting on this cake. I think the end game of this whole thing, this budget that we're talking about, all these things that we've brought to your attention are bad enough. However, I think the thing that tops everything that we've mentioned tonight is the fact that we still don't have an audit for 2011. We have no audit for 2012. We have no risk-based audit. The school numbers for June don't even add up, let alone make sense. But the Board of Education and the majority of the Board of Selectmen are asking you to pass a budget that makes absolutely no sense at all. The local government doesn't have the right to simply keep taking more and more of your money without even explaining or attempting to justify where these dollars are going. And we're not the only ones that bring this up. I mean, there's been several people that have come, and spoke during public comment, and we're demanding a line item budget from the Board of Education and wanted to know, how come we haven't had an audit. There was a little back and forth at our meeting at the Gilbert School where Selectman Perez said that, we always do budgets without having that audit completed, which is a complete falsehood. She was corrected that night by someone in the audience. But it's just, we are forever putting the cart ahead of the horse. We need this information. The townspeople need this information to make a, educated, choice on this budget. That's my belief.
No, and clearly, Ken, all the audit information and the fact that our fund balance is so low, it's going to affect our ability and maybe eliminate our ability to borrow money as we get to the investment side of the equation. We've said that time and time again. So all these things get factored into why Ken and I have been pretty adamant about maintaining our positions. And it's not just to, poke anybody in the eye or for personal gain. We hear those criticisms time and time again. The fact of the matter is that we're willing to make difficult decisions to move this forward in the right direction. And there's only really one direction that this can head. And we feel pretty strongly that we've got an opportunity here that we can take advantage of, and we're going to continue to to speak our opinions. And again, we hope that you vote on next Saturday. We appreciate your time tonight, and look forward to a referendum that allows us to go back and adjust some of these things that need to be adjusted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.